Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Corey Glenn, and I'm going to do a quick video here and show you how I'm using the prosthetic spacers to generate a bone reduction guide. These are a little STL file that I provide on my website, which is coryglenn.org. But I was planning these cases, so I've got to crank out a whole bunch of cases by this weekend. And let me put in a quick plug for that. So we're doing a course down at the Worley Implant Immersion course down in Mexico, in Puebla, Mexico. So it's the AAID All-Star course. So a lot of really great instructors. You can see all these people that are in the lineup here. But it's for a great cause. What we're doing is we're going down there, and the people who are paying to take the live course kind of get to pick their procedures. I want to learn a ridge split. I want to learn a lateral sinus lift. I want to do a double full arch guided with immediate load, photogrammetry, all these crazy procedures. The attendees who are coming are getting to do those, and they're getting to do them under the supervision of all of these great people that are experts in their various fields. But what I want to throw out there is that if that sounds appealing to you, and you obviously are too late to do the in-person, they're actually live streaming this entire thing. So you'll live stream the surgery, you'll see it in real time. There's interactivity between that, and then you'll have access to video recordings and everything after the fact. If you're interested in that, here's a little QR code that you can scan to sign up. And again, I think that's going to be a really valuable thing if you're trying to up your surgical skills. So look into that. That's coming up this next week, which is the July the 22nd week that we'll be doing that. So again, even if you can't, be right then and there watching it live, there's options that you can watch it after the fact and everything. And then also I'll put in a quick plug for some of my upcoming courses that are going to be here at my farm in Tennessee, which is a very fun place to take a course if you've never been. We're going to do the guided surgery course on August 29th and 30th. That's the one that assumes you know nothing. We're starting from ground zero and take you all the way through guiding all kinds of cases and planning the cases well, diagnosing, and then how to generate the guides, how to do the surgeries. And that'll go from simple cases up to the simpler full arch cases. And then September 12th, 13th, we've got the digital denture course. Again, that assumes you know nothing and takes you all the way through just dentures in general, how to get great results, techniques, but particularly how you can do those digitally. So design and then either print or mill them. And then finally in October, me and Danny are going to be doing our advanced full arch guided surgery course, which is always a big hit. That one is the kind of the top tier, the most complex cases. Obviously, Danny's an incredible implant surgeon. So we'd love to have you for any of those. We're actually doing this one on the 10th and 11th because I live right next to the Caverns, which is the most awesome music venue in the world. And Danny's always wanted to go to a concert there. So that's when Cave Fest is going on, which is just a huge music festival. Lots of great names that you'd recognize. So if you're interested in any of that, check out my website, coryglenn.org. Would love to have you for those. And then if you would do me a favor, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button on this video. If you're getting any value out of the content I post, would love for you to do that to help with the YouTubes. I make about $1.50 a month on all the stuff I get from YouTube currently. So I'm on a mission to get that up to maybe $2.50 or something like that. So help me out and like and subscribe. All right, so let's look at this case. So again, I'm having to crank out a bunch of these by this weekend, and I've got to be efficient with them. So that was really the reason I came up with this bone reduction spacer and prosthetic spacer. And so here you can see I've already got one and positioned it. This is kind of what it would look like in position, but let's bring one in and just kind of show you how I'm utilizing that. So in an ideal world, you would already have a perfect prosthetic wax up. You would know where the teeth need to be and position based off that. Somewhat limited. These are patients in Mexico. I'm having to do my best guesstimation on that because I don't have a face scan and some of the other things I would use to design an ideal smile. But given my prosthetic variability with multis and vortex screws and all that, we'll be able to deal with this. I know enough to be able to position this pretty close. So I've opened the case in Blue Sky Plan. You can see I don't have any intraoral scans either for this case, but Blue Sky Plan does do the automatic bone segmentation. That's going to be in your model master, and then go to your segmentation panel, and you can run automatic segmentation. All right, so we've done that. And then once I've got that, these are the existing teeth. All right, so I can pretty well see where the plane of occlusion is here. So these are the prosthetic spacers that you would purchase on my website. You know, there's a bunch of different options here. I'm going to just use the standard 15 millimeter one, and so I'll grab that and just drag and drop into my Blue Sky Plan file, and you can see it's come in this way. Now these are oriented depending on the arch you're using, so I'm going to change the color real quick just so you can see it a bit easier. All right, and so this would be oriented for the maxilla how it is currently. All right, so in model manipulation, you can simply choose that and then hit manual for your orientation, and that gives you the widget that lets you spin this thing around. And what I'm focused on doing, there's two parts to this thing, right? You've got this upper plane, and this is kind of supposed to represent a midline, and then that's what you're going to align to your occlusal plane, all right? And then 15 millimeters below that with this tapering edge, that is your plane of reduction. All right, so it kind of makes it mindless where you don't have to sit there and, you know, measure out every site. So the idea is I'm going to take my my prosthetic spacer, and my first goal is to get this aligned to the occlusal plane. Now these teeth are a little bit wonky and don't follow a perfect plane, which is why I would prefer to do this on an ideal wax up. But again, I'm working with what I got here, and this will get us close enough. 15 millimeters is going to be appropriate to do a hybrid, and that's going to be the plan for this patient, is an immediate load hybrid. All right, so I'm just getting this thing lined up with the widget, get it evenly spaced on the jaw. I'm pretty well following my occlusal plane here, right? You can see that. And so that means by default that my implants, if I want to have 15 millimeters of prosthetic spacing, need to go just below that. All right, so let me hide my pre-existing one that I've positioned. So we could go through now, and I've already placed my implants, but we could click on any one of these, and you can imagine if you were just dropping these into the case initially, you know, instead of trying to measure every individual site, like how deep do I put this implant down, you simply grab your implant, you make sure that it's at or below this lower outline, which is the level of bone reduction that's going to create 15 millimeters of prosthetic space. So I've just got the implant sunk down until it's just below that. I like to be a little bit subcrestal with that. All right, so in this scenario, we've positioned 6 implants in the mandible. We've got a couple of shorter ones in the posterior, and then we've got 4 in between the foramina. And I'm going to delete the one I just brought in and just, you know, work with the one that I've already positioned. Okay, same idea, it's already positioned here. And so now we're ready to go ahead and utilize this. So you've pulled it in, you've oriented your occlusal plane, that orients the plane of reduction, which tells you how deep your implants go. And once you've got all those positioned, now you're ready to make guides. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead, and at the moment, I don't need to see this. It's kind of already served its purpose. All right, so here's where all the implants are positioned. I don't need the roots on at the moment. And now we're ready to make a guide. So if I go to the guide panel, we're going to build the guide on the mandibular model. I've already drawn a curve here, but you know, you can see that I've got it way overextended, and that's intentionally. All right, I would much rather be way over contoured at this phase with it, and then I can chop it back really easily, and I'll show you how I use this spacer to accomplish that really quickly. But you're going to go ahead and just generate a guide. I will not have any guide tubes turned on when I do this initially. And I'll try to explain why as I go along. But for right now, just understand, I'm just making a guide over the mandible with no tubes. So it's essentially a mandibular night guard, for lack of a better term. All right. I do have some pins positioned, no tubes on for that either at the moment. So let's go ahead and create the surgical guide. It's going to ask you, hey, you don't have any tubes on, dummy. Do you want to do this? Yes. I don't, well, I'm sorry, I'll click no. I don't want to turn the tubes on right now. All right, and as I mentioned, I pretty much just end up with this, night guard on the mandible, way over contoured. You clearly can't use something this over contoured, but again, that's by design. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to export all my guide tubes, all my implants, the mandible, everything involved in this lower arch. I'm going to go ahead and extract or export. In fact, I'll just throw in the lower roots as well. All right, let's make sure there's nothing else I want to do here. That all looks good. So now I'm going to go to File, Export Data. If you're trying to export a bunch of stuff here at once, it's going to all just turn it into one STL file that you'll have to manually separate in another program, unless you come down here and tell it to export all these files to separated folders. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. It's going to deduct one export. And then I'll choose the folder that I want to save all those to, and everything is going to be exported. All right, so that's been done, and now I'm going to jump out of this program and go into Meshmixer, which is where I'm going to do, the booleans and attaching different things. Let me preface up front and tell you that we've just introduced version 5 in Blue Sky Plan. The upcoming update is adding virtually all of these features I'm about to do in Meshmixer. It's going to be in Blue Sky Plan as well, which I cannot wait for. That's going to be awesome to not have to jump around from program to program to pull this off. So anyway, just know that that's coming. Really looking forward to that. All right, let's go and minimize this. And here's all of those files that I just exported, and there's a bunch of them because obviously every single implant and guide tube is its own STL. I'll simplify that and combine those in a moment. But what I want to do right now is I want to just open this mandible. I'm going to use Meshmixer for the purposes of the tutorial, but there's a lot of CAD programs that would work for this. And then I'm also going to pull in the plane of reduction. I'm going to pull in everything but my implants right now. So mainly the reduction template and the surgical guide. And I'm going to drag and drop those into my Meshmixer case. All right, here you see all of my stuff. Now, I've got this designed in this way in 2 pieces, simply because it's going to make it easier to eliminate parts after they've served their purpose. Only reason I needed this was to align to that occlusal surface. After that, I don't need it anymore. So I'm going to select all that and delete it. This is what I really need. All right. Let's hide for a moment the lower roots and the mandible. And let's just look at the guide. Now, one thing to be aware of is that the software is going to build down into the sockets, because if you look back at what we built it on, the mandible itself has got all these sockets. All right, now it does have a path of draw, but good luck getting a guide to seat and trying to get it to go all the way down into those sockets. It's just not going to happen. And so if I wanted to get rid of those, I got a few options. I could just take a handpiece, grind these out once it's printed. And maybe if you leave a little bit of a nub there, that adds some lateral stability and keeps everything pushed down nice and tight. You could do that. I could manually come in here and try to select these and delete them. That's a little too time consuming for my liking. I'm going to do something else, which is I'm going to take these tooth roots, right? So all of these teeth that are going down in there, and if I was to Boolean subtract those from this guide, hey, that would delete them. And yeah, it'll create some holes up through the top, but I'm okay with that. That's all going to be in what gets reduced anyway. So that's what I'm going to do real quick. Now, because they're going to be virtually the same size, and you can see these models just poking through one another, I'm just going to take all of these teeth, select them all. I'm going to offset them by just like 0.2 of a millimeter. All right, so I'll just offset these by 0.2. I'll accept that, and while they're all still orange, I'm going to hit Y on my keyboard, which is the separate feature. All right, so now I've got two independent STLs. All right, you can see me toggling this on and off. Underlying in the gray, that was the original tooth roots, and now the pink outline that I've got turned off or now turned on, that's the offset roots. All right, and so by doing that, anywhere that I was kind of poking through into my where my meshes were too close together, that's gonna kind of swallow that up. And now I can hit guide, control, select all of those offset roots and do a Boolean difference. Now I'm going to speculate right now as this is working, it's going to fail because it's thinking too long. And so good to run into problems. We'll address why that is. Oh, and it made me a liar. Actually, it didn't have any problem whatsoever. It just that was thinking a lot longer than is normal for that. So maybe we'll run into a problem elsewhere and we can address that one as we come up. All right, so by virtue of doing that, you can see that now all of those roots that were sticking down in there, it's gotten rid of that. All right, so now I'm ready to kind of repurpose this into a bone reduction guide. So let's turn on my bone reduction template, and hopefully you can visualize that if I Boolean subtract this template from this guide, that's going to subtract everything that's above this plane. All right, which is great. That's what I want to do, is just turn this into a bone reduction guide. Now, we'll try this and see if it works. I anticipate, again, a problem, but I want to select the guide first. I'm subtracting the reduction guide, and let's hit Boolean difference. Okay, and again, it made me a liar. That worked great. What sometimes would happen is because that mesh is one-sided, on occasion you might get a little error where that's a problem because it doesn't necessarily see this plane as a solid watertight object. If you run into that, real simple. Select it all, and we're going to offset it by just a hair to give it some thickness. So I'm going to hit D, which is the offset, but I don't want to go deeper here. All right, it's offsetting by 1.2 millimeters in the positive direction, which means coming off the face of that STL. I'd rather go the other way, so I'm going to offset in the negative direction. All right, so if you were to run into a problem with that, now it should do it just fine. And there you see it. And the only difference here being that now I'm going to have a couple little floating pieces like that, which I'll select and delete. All right. So here's my initial bone reduction guide. All right. Notice everything poking up above that is the bone that needs to be reduced to flatten out the occlusal plane and create the prosthetic space. All right. And again, I've just got a hole here where that root was, and that's perfectly fine. There's still plenty of seating area on this. Now the other nice feature to that, now once you do a Boolean with something, you lose that object. So real easy, I'm going to just pull another one back in because I've already got that saved. And I'll get rid of the floating bit up there. So you see where that Boolean was done? That's created my bone reduction guide. Now I told you earlier I've way overextended the borders of this guide, and I do that because inevitably if you don't, you end up sometimes with a really thin area to your guide that's like, crap, I didn't make it big enough to start with, and now I've got a weak guide and I've got to go remake all that. So just over contour it like crazy, make it ridiculous big like what you see here. So what if I want to now reduce that? Okay, let's suppose I wanted to make a uniform 5 mm vertical height to this guide. All right, well, I'm not going to just trace that out. I'm going to just select all of this and I'm going to offset it by, again, if I want 5 mm, let's see what that looks like. All right, I think that looks maybe a little thick. I'm going to go down to 4. And then I can always take a handpiece and whittle this thing down a bit more. All right. So again, here in white, that was the original. Here is the same thing. It's just been offset positive direction by 4 mm, which means positive direction, it's going to come off this direction, which is apically in this scenario. So I'm going to get rid of the other one because remember, we've already done that. But now what I would like to do is subtract everything from here down, all right, from this plane down. So how could I do that? Well, this time, if I select everything, hit D for extrude, now again, you see I'm going in the positive direction, and this time that's the direction I want to go. All right, I can make it as big as I want. And now take your guide and Boolean difference that. Okay, great. I'm glad we were running into a problem here because you'll get to see why it is. If you ever do a Boolean and you have a failure, it's going to look reddish pink like this. Before you close that out and wonder what the heck went wrong, start looking for either a red or a blue spike in your mesh. All right, so there's something going on right there. I'm just making a mental note of where these are. And then there's something going on right in here. Let's figure out why that is. So I'm going to have to cancel. All right, why is it failing right there? And hopefully I'll be able to show you. I'm going to just punch a hole in the underside of this so you can see through. That's at the wrong position to see. All right, remember how I had two little spikes right here? Here's the culprit. That little area. I'm turning on the wireframe here. So anytime you start trying to do Booleans and it's just the tiniest little spot of one mesh poking through another, that's probably going to be a problematic area. So I could do a couple of things. I could either maybe use a sculpting brush like a shrink, get a real small spot size here. I could shrink this thing back. That will probably address it. All right, I'm just reducing the amount of that tiny bit of mesh poke through. Alternatively, I could maybe take something like an inflate brush and make it more impinging into the other one. Either one of those is going to address that, where now the Boolean feature works better. So that area is addressed. The other one was somewhere right in here. And I don't see exactly why that was again, and I've kind of lost my orientation. So I just repeat the process. What I expect now, I'm going to try my Boolean again. I think that those two little spikes are going to be fine, but it'll help me find this area where that one was. So Boolean difference. All right, again it failed, and actually I still failed right here. Okay, so I still need to go and address that. Probably what I ought to do is just shrink all that back, because you can see it's having difficulty creating the border around that because it's such a small area. All right, so it's pointing to right here, but what I'm noticing is it's outlining an entire red border. So something around the entire lingual border there is problematic. So I'll cancel it. Let's go ahead and just address this thing. I'm going to just shrink it back. Alright, I think that will work. Alright, why is it failing on this? It's not immediately obvious to me why. And, sometimes it's just hard to see if you can't look through this thing, so just open you up a big hole where you can see. Ah, now I see it. You see that little thing right there? So first of all, it's probably just got a hole in the mesh to start with. I bet if I do analysis inspector, sure enough, there's an error in the mesh right there. Now that alone may address the problem, but just like on the other area, I probably need to come back and do a couple little smoothing clicks on those little sharp pointy areas. And while I'm at it, I may do the same here, just a couple of clicks. Same here. See if there's anywhere else. I'm going to bet that that takes care of it. Alright, so select the guide first, then this object, Boolean difference, and sure enough that fixed it. Alright, got one little floating piece over there, so I'll select this, E for expand to all, I to invert, deselect that and select everything else, and then delete. And while I'm at it, I'm going to just go ahead and inspect and repair any holes that are in this. And I'm going to call this my baseline reduction guide. It's not entirely ready because it doesn't have my pin tubes in it, but this is what I'm after to start with. So let's save that or export it from Blue Sky Plan, or I'm sorry, export it from Meshmixer. And I'll call this reduction guide without tubes. Alright, and then I'm going to pull that file into Blue Sky Plan again. You don't need to stitch it because it's already been stitched. Alright, hopefully you can see how all of that worked there. I'm going to turn off that reduction guide, I'm sorry, the plane. Don't need to see that anymore. So here's the preliminary reduction guide, but what I need to do now is I need to build in these pin tubes. I'm still not going to build in these guide tubes just yet. That's going to be secondary. Well, I say that. Two of them I am going to. Alright. So the way this design is going to look, imagine this jaw has been reduced. These four anterior guide tubes are just going to be up there floating in air. Alright, so again in Meshmixer I'm going to use the add tube feature and just connect them up. Alright, so it'll be a two guide approach. You'd use the bone reduction guide, then you'd come back and you would use the drilling guide, which is still this same guide just with all those tubes added in. However, both of them need the pin tubes. So I need to add those two in. Then the other thing I'm looking at is on just these back two, where there isn't being any reduction done, I need to build in those two guide tubes. Alright. And so the way I'm going to hack this is I'm going to use the button that says create a scan appliance guide. And that's normally used for dentures, but all it's doing is it's telling the software, hey, take this exact object, usually a denture, but in my case it'll be this reduction guide, and build in whatever tubes I have on the screen. Alright, well I don't want to build in these four anteriors, so those I'm going to go one by one and turn them off. Alright, those four tubes I don't want built into this guide. But these two, since you can see the guide doesn't have holes enough to do this just yet, those I will want to build in. All right, so making sure everything's lined up here, and it looks pretty good. And so what I'm going to do now is in my guide panel, tell it take this reduction guide without tubes. I have my 3-pin tubes and just those two that are in areas that aren't being reduced, and now create a scan appliance guide. And it will do that, but now you'll be able to see. Let's turn off the blue one, which had no tubes on it. And now do you see what I have? It has taken the exact same object, duplicated it, and built in some guide tubes. Now, since these two implant sites are out of the way of my reduction, it's fine to leave those on my bone reduction guide. So this would be my final bone reduction guide. All right. Again, the fact that those exist there doesn't affect my bone reduction one way or another. Okay, so I would use this as my first guide. Flap the mandible, seat this, pin it into place, and then take down all of the bone that's sticking up above this. All right. I do see one little error it did, which is it overbuilt that guide tube, which is easy to address. Just use your cut tool, and let's just manually cut that. All right, great, that's done. The only thing that I lack doing, this is the final bone reduction guide. And I guess if you wanted to, you could just go ahead and use it to place those two implants if you wanted. That's really up to the user. But I am going to export just this one file here. This is my final bone reduction guide for the mandible. And then I'm going to complete this last step in Meshmixer. All right, I don't need this file anymore. I'm going to import the final lower bone reduction guide. You see it there. And now I need to bring in those remaining 4 tubes, and we're going to combine those in. So I'm going to import them. I don't know which is which on these, so I'm just going to bring all of them in. And then I'll just delete which ones I don't need. All right. So that one, that one, that one, and that one. Those are the 4 I want. Here, 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 here. And I'm going to combine them into one thing. This I don't need, this I don't need, this I don't need, this I don't need. All right. So now I've got just these 4 tubes. And what I need to do now is make guide number 2, which I would call the drilling guide. This is the one that you'd put on after bone reduction. It seats the same way, it pins in the same holes, but this one's purpose is just for drilling osteotomies for the implants and then guiding your implants into place. And I love the design of this. It's simple and it's easy to make, once you've done a few, because with this open face design, tons of irrigation gets in here. You're not as worried about overheating bone, which can be an issue with guides. You have to go slow and easy. So I want to combine this down to here. I'm going to do one thing first, and I just know this from experience that if I start trying to make these connections, the mesh using that tube feature doesn't play nice with these big elongated triangles. All right, so they're already combined. What I'm going to do to address that, instead of trying to remesh and everything, I'm going to just tell it to make solid. But you'll see like the quality of those degraded in doing that. What you want to do is before you accept this, change to sharp edge preservation and maximize your solid accuracy. So watch the update, how much cleaner these will be after I do this. All right, there you have it. So now you see this is more of like an equilateral triangle mesh, and they're nice clean edges on everything. This is what I'm after. All right, so now I've got the reduction guide file and I've got these tubes. Let's control select both and combine them into one. So now they're all one STL, but these things are still floating. They're not going to maintain that orientation unless we connect them. So here's what I'm going to do to connect. You got a few options. For example, I could go to Edit, Add a Tube. All right, I could take a tube and grab each end of that little green rod. We'll have a red node on it, and just tell it where I want to connect from. And then you've got other cool little things like how thick do you want to make those connectors. I'm going to make the radius be 1.5, so that means a 3 millimeter diameter tube. And then you've also got this thing called tangent length, and that just, do you want to create a bow and how that connects? And I kind of like that, so we can do that, and that looks great. Now here's your other option, and what I'll usually do is connect each guide tube to the other using this feature, and then I'll do the tubes down to the reduction guide using that add tube feature. All right, so go to your select and let's get a spot size something like that. It doesn't have to be ultra precise, but something big enough that it's going to make a good connection. And now I'm going to select 2 areas of mesh between these 2 things I want to connect. Go to Edit and hit Tube Handle. I don't know what in the heck tube handle is supposed to mean, but that's what it does. Alright, so practically it's a super useful tool for just bridging 2 areas of mesh. And it's fast. So I'll do the same thing. I'm going to connect all 4 of these. Tube handle. Alright, so those are all connected, and now I've just got to finish running some connections down from this to the guide. So I'll do one more, just talking through it, and then I'll time lapse the rest. So go to Edit, Add a Tube. Your settings that you most recently used should be what it defaults to. And so I don't want to put it up here and obstruct the top of my guide tubes. I'll do something like that. And now those are connected together. So I will do connections on the facial on each, on the lingual on each, and then maybe one on the distal or something. But I'll time lapse that. You can watch me do it. Okay, so you saw I finished making those connections, and now this is my final drill guide. All right, so all I've got to do now is save this or export it. All right, so we've got that. I need to remember to bring that back into the original Blue Sky plan file, just because, yes, this is what I'll print, but I want it to be in my original file as well. The last thing that I've forgot to do is I always like to make a model of the jaw of what it looks like after bone reduction, and so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Here's my mandible. Let's just bring back in that same plane that we used previously. And this is why this thing is so useful, is because once it's been saved and oriented, it's just really quick and easy to do these subtractions and make all these modifications. So now I'll choose my mandible, I'll choose my plane, and do a Boolean difference. Alright, and once again we did run into a little mesh error here. It doesn't like something about that, and so I'll accept it, and let's look at why. Alright, now here it's it's not so much that it's a small area, it's that it's razor thin from here to here. So another alternative you've got, instead of like trying to use shrinking brushes and things like that, if I go to sculpt, I've also got something called refine, and what that does is it's a remeshing tool. And so watch when I click here. The goal here is it shouldn't reshape the area, but do you see how it adds a lot of density to the triangles of the mesh? I'm going to undo that and make it a little bit stronger. And I'm just going to remesh these areas where I know it's going to be super thin. And just to be safe, I'll do that area too. So hopefully that Boolean will work now. And it fixed that one, but it didn't like this one now. So I'll probably have to do the same thing. That's the problem here, is we've got such thin facial bone that those things are just really skinny. So I'm going to probably have to chase down a few of these. I might just preemptively hit a few of these others if I notice them. Maybe right there. Maybe right there. All right, let's just try it, see if it works. And it did. All right, so whenever you get those failures with Boolean features in Meshmixer in particular, the things you're looking for is tiny areas of mesh poking through one another. Doesn't handle that real well. The other is really dissimilar meshes. Okay, so the mesh quality on that template is pretty coarse, and then the mandible is pretty fine. So when you start doing that and it's trying to do really skinny areas, that can be problematic for it. But this is what the mandible is going to. So here's the original mandible. The white's all the bone that gets reduced. I'm going to pull in that reduction guide just so you see it. So pull the teeth, lay a big flap, and then reduce all of this bone down to the level of these flats. And then the jaw will look like this. And then you would take this guide off and put on the drilling guide. And once again, it's going to sit exactly the same as the first reduction guide did. It is the same guide. The only addition has been these guide tubes floating up here. All right. So that's how this will all work. I'm just going to save this file as my reduced mandible. And now I'm going to pull all those new files I've generated back into Blue Sky Plan. I'm going to name this lower reduction guide. And now I'm going to pull in that reduced mandible and the final lower drill guide. I don't need to stitch them. If you allow it to auto stitch here, it's going to mess things up. This left the program in the correct orientation. I haven't altered that, so when I pull it back in after exporting, it's still in the right orientation. So just hit the X when you come to that. And there we have all of our files. All right. Pull teeth, put on the reduction guide, pin it into place, reduce the bone down to this level. Now your mandible looks like this. Now put in your drill guide and do your implant planning. I'm sorry, your implant placement, and your implants should go right into place like this. All right. So it's not a complex thing what I'm doing. The complex part here is that I'm having to use Meshmixer, which I get is intimidating if you're not familiar with the program. Really useful and valuable program, I think worth learning. But if that intimidates you, just be aware that there is an upcoming update to Blue Sky Plan. I don't know an exact time, but it's going to add a pretty much all of these features where you'll be able to stay right inside a Blue Sky plan to achieve all of this. And you already have a certain number of these features. For example, if you go to Model Master, you've already got a feature for doing Boolean operations, Boolean union, difference, intersections, and you can build in offsets with that. So you'd say, I want to do a Boolean difference between my initial guide and that plane of reduction. And you could go ahead and do that right now within Blue Sky Plan. The parts that I just don't exactly have a solution to in Blue Sky alone right now is the refining that mesh where it's not all those elongated triangles, and then the building these connections right here you could do by sticking in a custom implant and just making a link to where it matches, but that's not that user friendly, and then building the connections down to this. So the biggest thing I need, which that update is going to have, is these connector features. So be aware that that's coming. But that's it. I'll shut up for this video. Again, do yourself a favor, look into those coming courses. Course down at Dr. Worley's place in Puebla, Mexico. It's too late to do in person, but you're going to get 30 hours of CE for that. It's July 23rd through 26th, and this is for a great cause. It benefits the AEID Southern District and also the charitable clinic that Dr. Worley is running down there. So the orphanages and a lot of cool things that they're getting done. And then again, check out my courses. Would love to have you at one of these where we'll do deep dives into all of this kind of stuff and a lot more. All right, hope that was helpful. See ya.